HorseCenter fans, we have a big show today. We are talking Breeders' Cup Classic, Matt, and we are going to analyze the preps.
We're going to use the prep races from just last weekend and back into the summer to look at the probables for the Breeders' Cup Classic, and it is one of the most wide-open, contentious classics in many years.
Absolutely, Matt. A number of possible winners for the Breeders' Cup Classic, and hopefully our show analyzing each of the big preps for the Classic will help you decide. All that now on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. I got my calendar out the other day with a month to the Breeders' Cup. I start marking off the days.
Excellent. Matt, hey, for the Breeders' Cup, Churchill Downs, Louisville, where are you staying?
I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe there's some room in your house, but I understand you've got about 15 people signed up for this year's Breeders' Cup.
As long as you don't mind sharing a bed, my friend, it's going to be a fun time here at the Zipsy household for Breeders' Cup. Matt, speaking of Breeders' Cup, why don't we talk Breeders' Cup? What's the biggest Breeders' Cup race, Matt Shipman?
I think it's the Classic.
Got to be the Classic. People want to talk about the Classic. We've had some big favorites over the years. We might have a reasonably pretty big favorite this year, but I think one that's not scaring people off. I think we're going to have a big field, Matt, with a lot of possibilities. We're going to do a little something different this week. We are going to look at the biggest preps for the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to kind of analyze the race a little bit, and we're going to talk about all the contenders coming out of these preps. You ready to go?
Yep, let's do it.
Let's start with the most recent. It was the Awesome Again Saturday, Santa Anita. The Breeders' Cup Classic favorite will come out of the Awesome Again. It was Accelerate, Matt. Quietly, dare I say quietly, he's putting together the son of Looking at Lucky, this 5-year-old, graded stakes winner 3, graded stakes winner 4. But to tell you the truth, he was nowhere near the best horse in America either year in my estimation, or at least last year in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, he didn't show up. Now, all of a sudden, Matt, 5 graded stakes wins. He's won 4 straight graded stakes wins out in California, only interrupted by what I thought was a very brave re-rally up the rail to just miss in the Oaklawn Handicap. Otherwise, he's 6 for 6 this year. Accelerate.
Yeah, Brian, like you said, and I think it's a good description. He's quietly gone about winning big race after big race after big race out in California, and most recently it was in the Awesome Again. Yet with a really spectacular resume, a resume which is way better than anybody else that is probable for the Breeders' Cup Classic. There are still a lot of question marks. He's got a resume that, I mean, it not quite as good as Gunrunner had last year, but he doesn't come in with that wow, with that confidence that Gunrunner came into the Breeders' Cup Classic last year. For me, there was no doubt that Gunrunner was going to win the Classic, but this year with Accelerate, yep, he's going to be the favorite, but he's going to have a lot of challengers.
Okay, well, let's specifically look at this Awesome Again, Matt. It was Saturday, 9 furlongs, and it was made more interesting, of course, by the return of the 3-year-old champion of last year, the son of Flatter, West Coast, Bob Baffert's. I would think Bob Baffert's best chance at the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. West Coast is perfect, Matt. He's perfect in 2018, 3 for 3. Unfortunately, that's 3 for 3 running second. He ran second in the Pegasus World Cup. He ran second in the Dubai World Cup. And now, after a long layup, he comes back to run a good second. Accelerate, I never really thought of as a 1.25 mile horse before this year, but clearly he is after the performances he's put in. And now he comes out of this huge Pacific Classic at Del Mar where he won by a pole and then some at 1.25 miles. Drops down to 9 furlongs for his Breeders' Cup Classic prep, the Grade 1 Awesome Again. And just briefly, it looked like West Coast might really fight with him mid-stretch, Matt. What were you thinking then, and what were you thinking as Accelerate kind of pulled away and won pretty easily the last 100 yards or so?
Yeah, well, of course, the scenario that you set up was aided by the fact that Accelerate got away a bit slowly from the gate and gave the field a little bit of an advantage. But as you said, he did what he needed to do. It was a prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Maybe he wasn't cranked up as much as he was for some of the other starts for the Big Cap or for the Pacific Classic, but he did what he needed to do. He was able to go by West Coast, who Bob Baffert before the race proclaimed to be at about 80%, and drew off in a workmanlike fashion to get another win. Again, like you said, yeah, he quietly did what he needed to do.
Okay, well, quiet, yes, but not so much quiet on the track. What I meant by quiet was, not the whole nation is just thrilled and excited and loving how good a year Accelerate's having, because the Pacific Classic was anything but quiet. Here was more workmanlike, as you called it. The gate was not good. The gate break was not good for Accelerate, although he's not habitually having issues at the gate, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. The fact that he had to come from a little farther back than we thought, or that he has in most races, might not be a bad thing. A little learning experience, if you will, for the Breeders' Cup Classic. If he is fifth or sixth early, which may happen, as Matt, it looks like there's a lot of speed lining up for this race. So, yeah, I thought it was a good performance, but we need to talk about West Coast. For Accelerate, I thought it was the perfect prep, provided that he doesn't break badly in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But for West Coast, he had to get a lot out of this because, he's got tactical speed. He can be on the lead. He can be a little bit off it. Usually he's a little bit off it. But in races he's shown he can win on the front end. And, he was pressured on the turn and then into the stretch, and he certainly responded. He just looked like he was a little bit short here. Otherwise, he might have been running with Accelerate all the way to the wire. Don't we think that if West Coast moves forward off this race, and don't we think West Coast has a better overall resume outside of California than Accelerate? Therefore, don't we think that West Coast is a real contender for the Breeders' Cup Classic?
Sure, Brian. All those things that you said are absolutely true, but I've got a little voice in the back of my head saying, okay, he needed the race and he'll get a lot out of it. But bottom line is that he hasn't won a race since, you got to go all the way back more than a year now to the Pennsylvania Derby in 2017. So, like we were saying, there are still questions about Accelerate. There are certainly still questions about West Coast.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about both of those questions a little bit, because, again, I think these are two of the main contenders for the Breeders' Cup Classic, and it wouldn't shock me if these are actually the two favorites for the Breeders' Cup Classic. West Coast coming in as the second favorite a little bit because of the Baffert factor. You say he hasn't won in over a year, and that's true. But on the other hand, this is a horse who has a lot of wins. I mean, he strung together a lot of wins as a 3-year-old. That's why he was the 3-year-old champion. I don't have any doubts that this horse is a horse who knows how to win and can win again and will win again, provided he's in a race that he can win. Breeders' Cup Classic may be that race, Matt. So the fact that he was second in the Pegasus to Gun Runner, then he went over to Dubai and was beaten by Thundersnow, maybe not his best race of his life. And then after this long layoff, I saw a game horse who again, he's going to move forward off that. And I think West Coast is a major contender. As far as Accelerate, I almost worry a little bit more. I know Accelerate is the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Classic from everything he's done this year, everything he's done at 1.25 miles, and he's done it at some different tracks too. However, I do worry about California-based horses who come east on a non-regular basis. So West Coast, yes, he's California-based, but he's done it all over the place. Accelerate hasn't. So I do worry, because horses like that have struggled in the past when they come to Churchill or Belmont for a Breeders' Cup. And that's my only real question with Accelerate. Can he do his best running at Churchill Downs?
Yeah, and once again, we have to throw it in there. We have to throw in Accelerate's trainer John Sadler's Breeders' Cup record, which is 0 for 41. And we got to throw that out there.
We got to, but I would say he's due, Matt. Hey, Matt, let's shift gears from the West Coast to your neck of the woods, the East Coast. The historic Jockey Club Gold Cup. It's been around for a century, Matt. Was held on Saturday. It was not the result most people expected. I was looking for a rallier. I just got the wrong one, Matt. Who won the Jockey Club Gold Cup again?
Yeah, Brian, I think almost everybody got the wrong one except the trainer, Uriah St. Louis. Of course, we're talking about Discreet Lover, the Parks-based 5-year-old who's been running in the big races in New York, got a couple of thirds in there, threw in an enormous clunker in the Woodward when he was spun way, way, way outside. And then the Jockey Club Gold Cup, they came out of the gate. It looked like a quarter horse race to me, Brian, with the riders on Diversify and Mendelssohn getting after their horses for top speed right out of the gate. And they went fast, and they went fast, and they went way too fast, and set it up for a wonderful closing move by Discreet Lover at 45-1. It was a great story for those connections, but it certainly muddied up the picture for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
It muddied it up maybe a little bit, but also maybe pointed out some false favorites for the Breeders' Cup Classic. I guess I'm really talking about Diversify here. Diversify certainly is a top-notch Grade 1 horse, but leaving New York and having to face serious speed, we now think that Diversify has his hands full in the Breeders' Cup Classic for multiple reasons, rather than just the one reason of never having won outside of New York. It was a crazy pace, and of course that's why Discreet Lover won this race, was because of how fast Diversify and Mendelssohn ran the first quarter, the first half, the first 6 furlongs in here. 109 in a 1.25 mile race. You don't see that much anymore, Matt, and Diversify certainly did not handle it the last half mile. Mendelssohn, on the other hand, handled it reasonably well. He hung around. He was a good third. He was still in the pan picture there at the wire. The horse that maybe most interests me coming out of this race, Matt, because Discreet Lover, I got off him too much because of how badly he ran in the Woodward, but I'm not going to be on him for the Classic. It's a nice story. I'm glad the little guy, owner, trainer, I'm glad they won a race like this. It was nice to see, but on the other hand, I don't think he's going to beat them all again, and then twice as many good horses for the Classic. But Thundersnow really ran huge in the Dubai World Cup. He needed a prep race. He lost a shoe in that prep race against some of the best turf horses in the world. Obviously, he was ready to run here at Belmont in what really is a prep for him for the Breeders' Cup Classic. So the race Thundersnow ran, tactical horse who was able to really sit well back off that fast pace. His connection, Suleiman, was more than happy to watch what happened well ahead of him while he was in third. And then Thundersnow ran a big race from there and probably only gets better for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, Brian, I agree. I mean, the Dubai World Cup was visually impressive, but it did leave the questions about that track and the bias in the track at Meydan, and he came over to New York, changed his tactics a little bit, made the first move at the speed horses, went by them, handled the situation well, the travel, the new track. He just got run down by by the second move, which turned out to be the better move. But I liked Thunder Road personally after the Dubai World Cup. I bet Thundersnow in the first Breeders' Cup Classic futures pool, which was a few weeks ago. So I got a good price there, and I feel a lot better about that now.
Absolutely, as you should. Thundersnow has proven to be a 1.25 mile horse on any surface. And frankly, it looks like he's even better on dirt than it is on turf. I'm talking about perfect preps for the Breeders' Cup Classic. I would say this is an ideal prep for Thundersnow. Mendelssohn is interesting. Mendelssohn may still have room for improvement. Don't forget he's 3, and don't forget he had some issues this summer, and they didn't think he was cranked up for the Travers. I thought he ran a very good race considering everything in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Diversify, if you want to draw a line through it, go ahead. There is going to be speed in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I probably won't be betting Diversify. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have been betting him in the Classic before this race anyway. So now I'm afraid everybody's going to be on that bandwagon. Discreet Lover, I think one and done for him as far as big wins. So for me, Thundersnow is the most interesting horse out of the race, and Mendelssohn is the second most interesting horse, maybe if they could harness his speed just a little bit. Hey, Matt, the third Breeders' Cup Classic prep on Saturday. Well, I think it's a Breeders' Cup Classic prep. That's still a little bit of an unknown. Is the 9 Furlong Lucas Classic, which was held over that same track that will host the Breeders' Cup. Of course, I'm speaking of Churchill Downs. We had a very impressive winner, Mind Your Biscuits. He can sprint, he can go a long one turn, or he can go 2 turns. It's proven. The Whitney, where he was second in the sloppy track, holding off Discreet Lover, only behind the speedy Diversify, was reaffirmed or was validated, and then some, I think, Matt, with this performance by Mind Your Biscuits at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, certainly. The Lucas Classic is typically not a prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic, but Mind Your Biscuits trainer Chad Summers was clearly and outspokenly using it for that purpose. He went down to Churchill Downs with his horse a couple weeks before the race. He wanted to answer questions for himself about 2 turns, about the Churchill Downs surface. And he had his questions answered big time, Brian. I was very impressed with Mind Your Biscuits. I don't think I expected such a big performance in the race, but he seems to love Churchill Downs. Summers said that from the first time he got on the track, he loved the surface. He handled the 2 turns. Okay, it's not a Breeders' Cup Classic field, but that's not what they were looking for there. They were looking for the run around 2 turns. They were looking for a victory. They got that, and they got that more. They got an impressive victory. It was against a decent field by all means. I don't think Summers has committed himself yet, but I feel like they're going to go to the Classic at this point.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with you as far as the Classic. There's a few caveats I want to throw out there, or devil's advocates, Matt. Number one, not all 9 furlong races are created equally. You talked about maybe the quality of the field, but sometimes 9 furlongs plays less than 9 furlongs. Sometimes it plays more than 9 furlongs. This was a very fast track. He ran pretty darn fast time, 1:48 and change. And it seemed to me that the race was kind of over after maybe a mile. Mind Your Biscuits was close enough and made the move and then put him away. So in that way, maybe the race almost played a little bit shorter than it actually was, if you know what I mean. And maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on him, but it was a strong performance, and one performance. Listen, I think the Lucas Classic is a Breeders' Cup Classic prep when the Breeders' Cup is at Churchill Downs. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Honorable Duty, I was a little disappointed. He looked like he might do something on the rail, but he kind of didn't make a big move. And then the horse that ran second, the horse that held off Honorable Duty for second, or was better than Honorable Duty late for second, was Toast of New York. Really a remarkable story, man. We're talking about a horse that maybe should have won the Breeders' Cup Classic 4 years ago and didn't race a lot in between. There was breeding, there was all sorts of travel and layups and getting healthy again. For him to be running such a good race and maybe a race that he needed and will improve upon. Again, I'm not going to pick him for the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. He was my long shot 4 years ago, but just a remarkable story. Honorable Duty, if he steps forward, maybe he's a real bomb in the Breeders' Cup Classic to get into the exotics, but I'm not that hopeful after this race. Mind Your Biscuits, it's a tough decision because I think the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, he is one of 2 or 3 horses that really would stand over the field and probably is the number 1 horse to beat, knowing what he can do at this track and back at a distance. There will be speed in there that he probably likes best, although even that's in question now. Lucas Classic, for the Breeders' Cup Classic, they're talking about what they would have to pay to get in, so that they're talking about that makes me wonder if they're almost leaning a little bit towards the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile or thinking maybe that we should play it a little safer. But on the other hand, he could still win an Eclipse Award. As good as Accelerate's been all year, I don't know if anyone should take it away from Accelerate. But Mind Your Biscuits, he's top notch, and I want to see him. It reminds me a little bit of Liam's Map a few years ago, Keeneland, when American Pharaoh won the Classic. Liam's Map was certainly good enough to be in that field. He went to the Dirt Mile. He won it easily. He could have changed the way the Breeders' Cup Classic was run at the very least, or maybe he had a shot in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I wouldn't have liked him against American Pharaoh, but Mind Your Biscuits is going against a Classic field with no American Pharaohs. Yeah. I think we'd both like to see him in the Classic.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial part of this, and I think it's been part of Chad Summers' thinking all along, and that is that the older male division outside of Accelerate has been so wide open this year. I think that's been part of what Chad's plan has been, that he's ever going to take a shot in the Classic. This is the field to do it in, because there is no gun runner in there. There is no American Pharaoh in the Classic this year.
Right. There's no Arrogate. There's no California Chrome. There's Accelerate, and there's a lot of good horses. My inclination, having said I'd like to see him in the Breeders' Cup Classic, that's as a fan. My inclination for the Breeders' Cup Classic is he would not be one of my top couple picks at 1.25 miles. He probably would be my top pick for the Dirt Mile. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. Those were 3 big preps for the Breeders' Cup Classic, Matt, that all happened within a few hours of each other Saturday afternoon, New York, Kentucky, and California. Good chance that the Breeders' Cup Classic winner comes out of this Saturday of preps. However, there are some really big names that are getting a little bit more rest between their last prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I think we need to talk about these horses and the races they ran as well, Matt. Let's start with the Woodward, which was the last major race for older horses at Saratoga. And we had a winner who was a bit of a surprise, but maybe really shouldn't have been. Top-class turf horse. He made the trip to Royal Ascot, where he ran pretty well. He was a big Grade 1 winner at Churchill earlier in the year in turf. He had a lot of dirt breeding in his pedigree. Of course, I'm speaking about the very handsome Yoshida. Yoshida was a good winner of the Woodward, Matt.
He certainly was a good winner of the Woodward. Grade 1 winner on turf now, Grade 1 winner on the dirt now, in the barn of Bill Mott, so he's in good hands. I don't know, Brian. I liked his performance in the Woodward. I liked it a lot, but I just don't love horses training up to such a big race, a 10 furlong race like the Classic. I mean, these guys are the top trainers in the world, but I sure would like to see him have another race in there. I guess also in that race, as we're looking at the replay, remember that that final move around the turn. and the horse is getting spread out so wide around that final turn. And one of them was, of course, Gunnevera in there, who was 8 or 9 wide in there and made his run to come up and finish really well in the Woodward. He'll be in the Classic again. As you said, Brian, there's going to be a lot of speed in the Classic, and Gunnevera, regardless of where the race is, always seems to make his nice closing move. Again, I don't love the training up to the Classic.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's just the modern training style, Matt, and I'm not going to hold it against these horses that they're getting, what would it be, more like 8 or 9 weeks rather than 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, I wish they ran more often. In fact, I think if either one were in the Jockey Club Gold Cup as it was set up, they would have done very well. Gunnevera, I've been saying, is my long shot for the Breeders' Cup Classic for months now, and I'm still on board that. Yeah, he went maybe 9-10 wide in that Woodward run. Listen, Matt, the Woodward was not one of the best preps we're talking about right now. The rest of the field wasn't all that strong. Discreet Lover was in there, but he didn't run. The top 2 were clearly the top 2 best. Yoshida, there's breeding there that tells me 10 furlongs won't be a problem, although he never really proved it on turf, so we'll have to wait and see. But I thought this was a powerful move, and in a race, 10 furlongs at Churchill Downs with speed, I think it's the kind of move that can win. And Bill Mott, there's not many trainers. Talk about Bob Baffert for the Triple Crown. There's not many trainers I'd rather have for the Breeders' Cup than Bill Mott. He gets horses ready for the Breeders' Cup properly, and Yoshida, I think, is a threat. I want to see how much he's bet in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I have a feeling he'll be a little bit forgotten.
Yep.
And he's a very interesting horse. On the other hand, I could see Yoshida running 8th in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Matt, unfortunately, he's one of those horses, but he's had a very interesting year, as I mentioned, turf and then Ascot and then coming back to dirt and winning that nice race. Gunnevera, 10 furlongs, Churchill Downs with speed, 20-1. What's not to like there? And I think both of these horses ran their race in the Woodward. If they bring that race back against tougher competition in the Breeders' Cup Classic, Matt, I think they're both very interesting. Maybe Yoshida's 12-1 and Gunnevera's 25-1. They got to be on my tickets.
Yeah, no doubt that they are both going to have attractive odds in the Classic.
All right. That's our Woodward. Matt, let's stick at Saratoga, and with the Triple Crown, the top horses from the Triple Crown really falling off the Breeders' Cup Classic trail. It's going to be some other 3-year-olds that really didn't run in the Triple Crown that might make some noise in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and that's happened before. Tis now, Arrogate, I'm thinking. So maybe this year we should look at other 3-year-old races. So we'll start with the Travers. And I tell you what, Catholic Boy's performance in the Travers was eye-opening after several races on the turf, or a few races on the turf in between his dirt experience. And the fact that Mendelssohn came back and I thought ran a really good Jockey Club only flatters Catholic Boy a little bit more.
Yes, Brian, I agree with everything you're saying. Once again, I'm going to say I don't love that he's training up to the Breeders' Cup Classic, especially as a 3-year-old. But I've liked this horse all along. I liked him early on the Derby Trail. His performances after the Triple Crown on the turf were absolutely terrific. And then the move to the Travers and his victory there was just so impressive. The other horse that personally I bet in the Breeders' Cup Classic Futures was Catholic Boy. I like Catholic Boy. I think he's got a good shot in this race. But again, he is a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds have won the Classic before, and maybe this is one of those years when it's a wide open field that improving 3-year-olds have their best shot in here.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, Matt. I don't think there's any necessarily world beaters in here, but all things being equal, I do like older against 3-year-olds. So that's a slight negative to Catholic Boy. I also worry about this, Matt. Accelerate, West Coast Thundersnow. They're all tactical speed. Diversify probably will still go. Mendelssohn, they're all speed. Catholic Boy is tactical speed. So I wonder if there's just too much going on up early for a 3-year-old trying to face tougher olders in here. Couple of negatives. Positives, though. Obviously, he's run some big races on dirt. I don't think there's any more worry, going back to the Remsen and even his Tampa Bay race early in the year. And then, of course, the Travers. He's proven now on dirt. I'll tell you what, Matt, he's also proven at 10 furlongs because he beat a heck of a good turf horse, Analyze It, who, by the way, is my pick to win the Shadwell Turf Mile against Older on Saturday at Keeneland. And then he won the Travers. So Catholic Boy is, despite being 3, is one of the most proven 10 furlong horses in the race. I also can't help but to compare him to Yoshida a little bit, Matt, in that they were both thought to be turf horses. They both won big Grade 1 races at Saratoga, returning to dirt. I think I like the experience and the running style of Yoshida a little bit more for what I expect to see in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, Brian, and I think that you're going to like the price a lot better on Yoshida. I think Catholic Boy, with his Travers win and with his other wins on the dirt, is going to take a lot more action at the windows than Yoshida is. It's really hard to try and figure out how much action a horse like Catholic Boy will get when you talk about some of the older horses that we've been mentioning, when you talk about the Bob Baffert runners. So it certainly is interesting, and I'm sure in subsequent shows we'll talk a lot more about that kind of thing.
Yeah, Catholic Boy, I don't want to be negative because the Travers was a really strong performance. Again, flattered by how well Mendelssohn looked against older horses in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So Catholic Boy, there's a lot to like there. But Matt, as we looked at this Travers a little bit, it occurs to me that we've now talked about 8, 9, 10 horses that can win the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're not even done. And we're not even saying Catholic Boy may be the favorite among the 3-year-olds. The reason that Catholic Boy may not be the favorite 3-year-old going into the Breeders' Cup Classic, of course, is the Bob Baffert factor. Their impressive return of McKinsey winning the Pennsylvania Derby recently at Parks. And Matt, some of the also-rans in the Travers came back to Parks to contest the Pennsylvania Derby. And I'll tell you what, McKinsey beat them easier than Catholic Boy beat him in the Travers. Again, splitting hairs there, but McKinsey was a nice return race, as the only horse within his area code at the finish was Axelrod. So McKinsey, son of Street Sense. Street Sense, of course, won a 1.25 mile race at Churchill Downs, if we remember, Matt. He looks like an interesting, I don't know if you call him a wild card or not, but an interesting horse headed to the Breeders' Cup Classic. Yeah,
Brian, I will be honest, I didn't expect that impressive a performance off the layoff, off a 6-month layoff from McKinsey, but Baffert had him ready to roll, and we talked about it on a show a couple weeks ago. He looked like a winner every step of the way. The only horse that was close to him was Axelrod, and just as a side note, Axelrod just the other day was sold to a whole group of owners who were very impressed with his performance in the Pennsylvania Derby. He will stay with trainer Michael McCarthy, but I think that whole thing flatters McKinsey a little bit because he handled that horse easily in there. I think, Brian, out of Baffert's 2 horses, McKinsey and West Coast, I think maybe I like McKinsey a little bit more.
Okay, well, first the Penn Derby, a couple notes as we look at this race is the final time. I think we can draw a line through the final time, whatever that means. In other words, it doesn't bother me in the least bit. It was a slow track. The times were consistently slow. Good horses were running slow that day from 6 furlongs on to 9 furlongs. So don't worry about the time. The other thing is there were some horses in there that I thought might run some better races in the Penn Derby, and they didn't, which tells me that it's going to be really hard to turn it around for anybody else in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Axelrod is certainly a horse on the come. He's a horse who's getting better and better, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes next. But McKinsey's the horse from the Penn Derby. Now, what you said about the Baffert, two interesting Baffert horses, I have to side with West Coast. Here's why, Matt. West Coast is proven at 10 furlongs. West Coast is proven in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He ran second in it last year. He ran third in it last year. He ran second in the Dubai World Cup this year. They both had long layups. They both ran good races. I think West Coast's race to Accelerate was every bit as good as McKinsey's win in the Penn Derby, considering who was in the race against them. They both have typical running styles, and that's something else we need to mention about McKinsey. As I just talked about with Catholic Boy, there are a lot of horses who want to be on or near or stalking that early lead, and McKinsey's just one more of them. He has shown the ability to pass horses at least, so that tactical ability is a good thing. But the more I look at these races, and the Penn Derby included, Matt, I'm thinking that there's some good opportunity for horses who want to rally at 10 furlongs for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, Brian, that isn't going to be an intriguing part of making choices in the Classic. That there are so many horses with that on the lead, stalking kind of running style. They can't all be right there at the end of the race. So a lot of intriguing things there. Brian, you got any other horses that you want to throw into the list of possibles for the Classic?
Yeah, well, I think I've given up on a 3-year-old running a big race in this year if they're not named Catholic Boy or McKinsey. I think those are the two that really have a shot, because the rest of the 3-year-olds don't look, they're either retired or they don't look like they're headed in the right direction for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Super wildcards could be, we know some really good Europeans are probably going to come for the Breeders' Cup, although it's not a certainty. Enable could come after the Arc. I would be willing to bet anything that Enable runs in the Breeders' Cup turf if she comes. So I don't think she's on the board. Yeah, Matt, if Gosden does decide to split them up, brings multiple horses and splits them up, I think Roaring Lion becomes a very interesting horse. Obviously one of the best horses in Europe. He's running in the Champion Stakes at Ascot next week. So we'll have to see how he does there and what Gosden decides coming out of that race. But if somehow Roaring Lion comes into this race, I think he's got a shot. Kitten's Joy generally are better on turf, but Kitten's Joy have run well on dirt, and they've run well at Churchill Downs on dirt. That horse is so classy that I would have to at least worry about him if he's in the Breeders' Cup Classic. How about you?
Yeah, well, I guess we have to throw in the name of Pavel in there. He ran second in the Pacific Classic, behind Accelerate, and there's lots of people that are fans of that Doug O'Neill horse in there. Again, he'll be an enormous price in the Classic.
Yeah, and Pavel had, of course, that big win over the Churchill Downs track, beating Lesser in the Stephen Foster, and then he got really railroaded by Accelerate. But yeah, in this year of wide open Classic, maybe a long shot does good things. So Pavel deserves mention. All right, folks, that was our show on the Breeders' Cup Classic, analyzing the preps. As always, Matt and I thank you for watching the show every week. We do want to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. And folks, if you haven't yet subscribed, I'm surprised that you haven't. But if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here at Horse Racing Nation, please do so. Matt, unfortunately, our horses Derby Day Racing, we're on a holding pattern a little bit, as both are getting a little bit of time with both have a slight minor physical setbacks, but they're going to be fine and back in training any day. Parting shot from you today, sir?
Yeah, I mean, this is the last weekend of official Breeders' Cup Win and You're In races. And then here on HorseCenter, our shows will be all about the Breeders' Cup. And of course, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Thank you to Brett. Sorry for jumping the gun a little bit there, Matt. Keeneland's opening weekend, their short fall meet at Keeneland. I'll be there Friday. Hope to see some HorseCenter fans out there for opening day at Keeneland. And then, Matt, the biggest race of all, I hate to say it with all these big races in America, all these winning you're in races in America, but the biggest race of all this week is the Arc. The Arc is one of the best races in the world. It has been my entire lifetime. And we are going to see a field of 15 at Longchamp in Paris for this Sunday's Arc de Triomphe. And, of course, the horse to beat was the 3-year-old filly who won it last year. Now she's back. Now she's 4. Let's watch Enable winning last year's Arc as we say goodbye from HorseCenter.
She's 1.8, the odds-on favourite, and that's it there. Under starters' orders. Longines timekeeper, and they're off and racing in the Qatar Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe over 2,400 metres. Enable got a good start down towards the inside. Remember, this first turn is left-handed. No one wants to go anywhere near the outside. Of course, if you go to the outside early, you actually are saving ground, but Enable's just about got the lead. Idaho with the white blaze. Ulysses with the noseband as the monster field of 18 complete the first 200 to 300 metres. Winter just giving Akitos a bit of a bump. Clamato, he began well. He's sticking towards the inside. He'll be the first to get towards the rail. They're found right across the course, down the middle. In the blue cap, Idaho has come through and taken the lead. Enable in second placing. In third placing is Order of St. George on the outside, followed by Clamato, who's back down on the rail. They were followed then by Ulysses and Satono Noblesse, just getting a seat behind those. Then Shinga's Secret. Then came Clamato, followed by Winter Cloth of Stars. Next is Satono Diamond, followed by Capri. Akitos was back down on the rail. Plumatic was wider, followed then by Capri. Wellback was 1 Foot in Heaven along with Zarak, and also Doha Dream, 7th Heaven, 1 Foot in Heaven, and last of 16 Silver Wave. They head down past Le Grand Écurie. They're about to go across the road. They're continuing to go downhill, but all the time about to head towards the uphill and the finish of the arc. They're at the halfway across the road. In the second final arc at Chantilly, the 4th time held away from Longchamp, and they're heading to the 1,000 metres pole in the €5 million biggest race in the world, 127.1 at the 1,000 metres. The Qatar Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe field. Head uphill for home, Idaho, a length Order of St. George. Clamato right on the pace in third. Enable box seating in 4th placing. 5th out wider was Shinga's Secret. Then Satono Noblesse. Satono Diamond coming into it. Then Winter as they pass. La Mer Mechi and the Chateau, followed for the back by Capri. Then Cloth of Stars. They were followed then by Akitos at the 600 metres. 152.38. Doha Dream. 7th Heaven Capri. 1 Foot in Heaven. Silver Wave are all towards the rear of the field. 400 metres to go. And the leader is Idaho. Here's Enable now moving up on the outside. A 29th ride in the arc for Frankie Dettori. At the 300, Ulysses with the noseband. Then Shinga's Secret, Order of St. George. But Enable! She's gone 3 clear at the 200 metres. 4, 5 clear. She's going to become the first ever British filly to win the arc. And Enable has slaughtered them inside the final 50. Frankie's won 5 arcs. Enable by 3 has slaughtered them in the arc. Second place has gone to a great run on the outside from Cloth of Stars. They were followed then back in behind those by, on the outside, Ulysses from Clamato, and then further back to Zarak. And Enable, she has capped off a brilliant season. She becomes the 60th 3-year-old to win the arc, a 5th victory in the race of Prince Khalid Abdullah, a 2nd for John Gosden, a 5th for Frankie Dettori, and she's absolutely slaughtered them by 3 lengths. Cloth of Stars is in 2nd position, a length to Ulysses in 3rd, a length and a half to Order of St. George in 4th. There's a length and a half to Clamato behind these in 5th position, then a half length behind these Shinga's Secret on the nod for 6th place, but we'll get that ahead of Akitos. Then came in behind those 2 Idaho, Winter, then Zarak, 1 Foot in Heaven, Doha Dream, Plumatic, Satono Diamond weakening out of it. He beat Capri, 7th Heaven, and Satono Noblesse towards the rear of the field. Number 17, Enable, ridden by Frankie Dettori, 1st, 2nd, 5, Cloth of Stars, Mikael Barcelona, 3rd, 4, Ulysses, 4th in the race.